So today's all about comfort food, and when I asked the Dashing Dish community, what do you think of when you think of comfort food? The overwhelming response was some sort of chicken pot pie with biscuits. And I couldn't agree more, so today we're gonna make a really simple chicken pot pie with homemade biscuits, all ready in under about 35 minutes. So you'll be blown away at how easy this is. So I just sprayed a saute pan with cooking spray and then diced up some celery and some onion and added 1/2 cup of chicken stock to the pan. And really all I did was just let the celery and the onion cook down and get tender. So that's what the chicken stock is for, is to kind of help the celery break down, because you don't want to take a bite into a really hard piece of celery. So you just want it to get nice and soft. Then, really simple shortcut, I have 2 cups of carrots and peas that were frozen, and I just de-thawed them in the microwave for about 30 seconds. You could also just add them straight to the pan and de-thaw them there. And that looks like a good base to our chicken pot pie filling. And it already smells so good. And then I'm gonna do 1/2 teaspoon of thyme. Now, thyme is a really popular seasoning to use in holiday recipes. So a lot of times when you think of comfort food, it brings you back to times that you just really enjoyed yourself. You were usually with family and friends, and you just felt cozy and at home. And so a lot of times, for most of us, that's the holidays, that's special occasions with family and friends, and also birthdays. So I think that's why when we think about comfort food, we do think of casseroles and warm, hearty dishes that we think of Thanksgiving and holidays that we attend. So then to this, I'm gonna add 1/4 cup of oat flour. And this is a really good swap out. When I think about comfort food and I think of creamy sauces, a lot of times in order to make a creamy sauce, we have to make something called a roux, which is basically white flour and butter. But instead of using white flour, we're just using 1/4 cup of oat flour, so it's a whole grain and much better for you. And you won't even notice the difference or that anything has changed from the white flour. So I'm just adding that, and what this does is makes a nice thick sauce when we add it to the veggies. So we're just gonna coat all the veggies in this oat flour. We're gonna kind of stir it around, and you just wanna let it cook for about a minute in the pan. Just enough to kind of cook that oat flour through and get all the veggies coated. Then I'm gonna add 2 cups of almond milk, but you can add any kind of milk that you like. And then we have 1/2 cup of chicken stock. So once we add both of these liquids and we turn up the heat just a little bit, you'll see how it starts to thicken up pretty quickly. So now I'm gonna add my 2 cups of cooked chicken. And I'm just gonna stir that in. And then now that it's boiling, I'm gonna turn the heat down to a simmer. And we'll let this continue to thicken, and when we come back, my sister's gonna be joining me to make the biscuits that are absolutely easy and delicious to top this filling off with, and then we'll bake it. Nothing says comfort food like chicken pot pie with homemade biscuits, and we're making a clean eating, gluten-free version today in under 30 minutes. So I'm gonna make the biscuits to go with our filling that we just made. And I just put the filling into a 9x13 baking dish, and we're gonna make the biscuits, put them right on top, stick it in the oven. So simple. So I'm gonna have you add to the bowl, we're gonna just make the biscuit filling right here, 1 cup of plain Greek yogurt, and that kind of swaps out butter or oil in a recipe when it comes to making biscuits a little bit healthier. And it adds some protein, which is nice. And then 1 cup of cheese, and you might be thinking, cheese, that's interesting. But it just adds a lot of flavor. If you don't really like cheese, you really can't taste it in there. It just adds a nice salty flavor and also some moisture. And then I'm gonna add 1/2 cup of almond flour. And that adds a little bit of nuttiness to these biscuits and also some moisture because it's a healthy fat with the almonds. And almond flour is just basically almonds that are ground into a flour. And then 1.5 cup of oat flour. And oat flour is just old-fashioned oats ground into a flour, so much better for you than white flour.
This reminds me of our childhood when Mom used to make chicken pot pie, but a healthier version.
Yes. And then I'll have you add 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda and 1 teaspoon of baking powder. And that just makes the biscuits fluffy and also rise. So Em, I was gonna ask you, speaking of our childhood and comfort food, what really reminds you of, our childhood when it comes to food?
Definitely macaroni and cheese, chicken pot pie, French bread pizzas.
French bread pizzas.
Yes. But what I love most about chicken pot pie is like the smell. Like it just reminds me of mom.
It's true.
And of warmth. It's something you make in the fall or the winter, just the warm smell. So that's why I love it.
It's true. It's amazing how smells can really bring us back to certain memories and times in our lives, and how it can really make us feel at home. And I think the thyme in the chicken pot pie filling is a really strong smell when you bake it. And often it reminds me of Thanksgiving as well. So, all right, so this is coming together. You just want to stir it until it forms a nice dough for you. So that's looking pretty good there.
It's crazy you can make your own biscuits that easily.
I know, so easy.
Like 3
We didn't
ingredients.
have to wait for them to rise. You didn't have to buy the canned stuff. I mean, it really is just putting a few ingredients into a bowl, stirring it, and then we're gonna just lightly roll it out. And this is my secret for really easy rolling when it comes to cookies or biscuits or any kind of dough, is putting it between 2 pieces of parchment paper.
Smart.
Because then you don't even really have to get your rolling pin dirty. It just kind of keeps everything clean on your countertops, and it prevents sticking too, which is nice. So we're just gonna get that out onto the parchment paper as best as we can there.
I love that you added cheese. Can you do this without cheese?
Yeah, I mean, technically you could swap it out for more oat flour or almond flour, so a different kind of flour. But again, you can't really taste, it doesn't taste cheesy necessarily, it just adds a different depth of flavor for these biscuits. Now, there's 2 different ways you could cut out these biscuits. If you have a circle cookie cutter, that works perfect. But if you don't have one at home, then what you can do is you can either use a mason jar lid or top, like I have here, or just a mason jar and just cut out the circles. So you want to roll it out.
How thick do you want this?
Yep, that's perfect. About 1/8 of an inch, I'd say. So just so that you can cut 6 biscuits out, really. So Em, I'll give you the cookie cutter and then I'll do the mason jar lid. So we're just gonna kind of lay these on top. There's no rhyme or reason of how they need to be, but we're making about 6 biscuits out of this dough. So we're gonna kind of lay them on top. So you'll want gaps in your filling so that it gets bubbly and the biscuits get lightly golden brown.
So this is nice because each person gets their own biscuit if you get 6 servings out of that.
Yeah, so, and it is 6 servings technically, but you could also stretch it as far as 8 because it's a lot of filling. Now, if you have extra dough, then what you could do is you can just continue to cut this dough out and put it onto a baking pan and just stick it in the oven rack right under your baking dish here. And then you can bake them alongside the pot pie. And who doesn't love extra biscuits to go along with their pot pie filling? We'll bake this at 350 degrees for about 25 minutes until the filling is nice and bubbly and the biscuits are lightly golden brown.